Morning, hello, and welcome to India Reads. I'm sorry about my lockdown hairstyle. It seems to be getting weirder and weirder. We are reading The Story of My Experiments with Truth by Mahatma Gandhi, and we have reached page 100. Just to give you all a recap, Gandhi right now has been discussing about clearing the bar examination and how it was not so difficult for at that point of time. The fact that he went over and above the expected level by studying Latin, which helped him in Roman law later in his career as a lawyer in South Africa. So let's continue. 25. My helplessness. It was easy to be called, but it was difficult to practice at the bar. I have read the laws but not learned how to practice law. I had read with interest legal maxims but did not know how to apply them in my profession. Sic uter tuo ut alineum non laudis. Use your property in such a way as to not damage that of others was one of them. But I was lost to know how one could employ this maxim for the benefit of one's client. I had read all the leading cases on this maxim, but they gave me no confidence in the application of it or in the practice of law. Besides, I had learned nothing at all of Indian law. I had not the slightest idea of Hindu and Mohammedan law. It says Mohammedan, but I guess it's Mohammedan law. I had not even learned how to draft a plaint and felt completely at sea. I had heard of Sir Firoz Shah Mehta as one who rode like a lion in law courts. How, I wondered, could he have learned the art in England? It was out of question for me ever to acquire his legal acumen, but I had serious misgivings as to whether I should be able to learn a living by the profession. I was torn with these doubts and anxieties whilst I was studying law. I confided my difficulties to some of my friends. One of them suggested that I should seek Dadabhai Nauroji's advice. I had already said that. While I went to England, I possessed a note of introduction to Dadabhai. I availed myself of it very late. I had thought I had no right to trouble such a great man for an interview. Whenever an address by him was announced, I would attend it, listen to him from a corner of the hall, and go away without having feasted my eyes and ears. In order to come close touch with the students, he had founded an association. I used to attend its meetings and rejoice at Dadabhai's solicitude for the students and the latter's respect for him. In course of time, I had mustered the courage to present to him the note of introduction. He said, "You can come and have my advice whenever you like." But I never availed myself of the offer. I thought it was wrong to trouble him without the most pressing necessity. Therefore, I dared not venture to accept my friend's advice to submit my difficulties to Dadabhai at that time. I forget now whether it was the same friend or someone else who recommended me to meet Mr. Frederick Pincutt. He was a conservative, but his affection for Indian students was pure and unselfish. Many students sought his advice, and I also applied to him for an appointment, which he granted. I can never forget that interview. He greeted me as a friend. He laughed away my pessimism. "Do you think," he said, "that everyone must be a Firoz Shah Mehta? Firoz Shahs and Badruddins are rare. Rest assured, it takes no unusual skill to be an ordinary lawyer. Common honesty and industry are enough to enable him to make a living. All cases are not complicated. Well, let me know the extent of your general reading." When I acquainted him with my little stock of reading, he was, as I could see, rather disappointed. But it was only for a moment. Soon his face beamed with a pleasing smile and he said, "I understand your trouble. Your general reading is meagre. You have no knowledge of the world, a sine qua non for a vakil. You have not even read the history of India. A vakil should know human nature. He should be able to read a man's character from his face. And every Indian ought to know Indian history. This has no connection with the practice of law, but you ought to have that knowledge. I see that you have not even read K. and Milson's history of the mutiny of 1857. Get hold of that at once and also read two more books to understand human nature. They were Lavater and Cheval Pennick's books on physiognomy. I was extremely grateful to this venerable friend. In his presence, I found all my fear gone, and as soon as I left him, I began to worry again. To know a man from his face was a question that haunted me as I thought of these two books on my way home. The next day, I purchased Lavater's book. Cheval Pennick's was not available at the shop. I read Lavator's book and found it more difficult than Snell's Equity and scarcely interesting. I studied Shakespeare's physiognomy, but did not acquire the knack of finding out Shakespeare's walking up and down the streets of London. Lavator's book did not add to my knowledge. Mr. Pincott's advice did me very little direct service, but his kindness, there's a lot of spelling mistakes here, but his kindliness stood me in good stead. His smiling, open face stayed in my memory, and I trusted his advice that Firoz Shah Mehta's acumen, memory, and ability were not essential to the making of a successful lawyer. Honesty and industry were enough. And as I had a fair share of these last, I felt somehow reassured. I could not read Kay's and Mailson's volumes in England, but I did so in South Africa, and I made a point of reading them at the first opportunity. Thus, with a little leaven of hope mixed with despair, I landed at Bombay from SS Assam. The sea was rough in the harbour, and I had to reach the quay in a lodge. We finished part 1 and we are at part 2. Raychand Bhai. I said in the last chapter that the sea was rough in Bombay harbour, not an unusual thing in the Arabian Sea in June and July. It had been choppy all the way from Aden. Almost every passenger was sick. I alone was in perfect form, staying on deck to see the stormy surge and enjoy the splash of the waves. At breakfast, there would be just 1 or 2 people besides myself eating their oatmeal porridge from plates carefully held in their laps, lest the porridge itself finds its place there. The outer storm was to me a symbol of the inner. Even as the former left me unperturbed, I can say the same about the later. I think I can say the same about the later. There was the trouble with the caste that was to confront me. I have already adverted to my helplessness in starting on my profession. And then, as I was a reformer, I was taxing myself on how to begin certain reforms. But there was even more in store for me than I knew. My elder brother had come to meet me at the dock. He had already made the acquaintance of Dr. Mehta and his elder brother, and as Dr. Mehta insisted on putting me up at his house, we went there. Thus the acquaintance began in England and continued in India and ripened into permanent friendship between the two families. I was pining to see my mother. I did not know that she was no more in the flesh to receive me back into her bosom. The sad news was now given me, and I underwent the usual ablution. My brother had kept me ignorant of her death, which took place whilst I was still in England. He wanted to spare me the blow in a foreign land. The news, however, was nonetheless a severe shock to me. I must not dwell upon it. My grief was even greater than over my father's death. Most of my cherished hopes were shattered, but I remember that I did not give myself up to any wild expression of grief. I could not even check the tears and took to life as though nothing had happened. Dr. Mehta introduced me to several friends, one of them being his brother Sri Reva Shankar Jagjeevan, with whom there grew a lifelong friendship. But the introduction that I needed particularly to take note of was one of the poet Raychand Rajchandra, the son-in-law of an elder brother of Dr. Mehta and the partner of the firm of jewelers conducted in the name of Reva Shankar Jagjeevan. He was not about 25 then, but my first meeting with him convinced me that he was a man of great character and learning. He was also known as Shatavadhani, one having the faculty of remember or attending 100 things simultaneously. So it's Shatavadhini. And Dr. Mehta recommended me to see some of his memory feats. I exhausted my vocabulary of all European tongues I knew and asked the poet to repeat the words. He did so in the precise order in which I had given him. I envied his gift without, however, coming under its spell. The thing that cast its spell over me, I came to know afterwards. This was his wide knowledge of the scriptures, his spotless character, and his burning passion for self-realization. I saw later that this last was only a thing for which he lived. The following lines of Muktanand were always on his lips and engraved on the tablets of his heart. I shall think myself blessed only when I see him in every one of my daily acts. Verily, he is the thread that supports Muktanand's life. Raichand Bhai's commercial transactions covered hundreds of thousands. He was a connoisseur of pearls and diamonds. No naughty business problem was too difficult for him, but all these things were not centered around which his life revolved. Center around it should be, on which his life revolved. The center was the passion to see God face to face. Amongst the things on his business table were invariably to be found some religious book and his diary. The moment he finished his business, he opened the religious book or the diary. Much of his published writings is a reproduction from this diary. The man who, immediately on finishing his talk about weighty business transaction, began to write about the hidden things of the spirit could evidently not be a businessman at all, but a truth seeker after truth. And I saw him thus absorbed in godly pursuits in the midst of business, not once or twice, but very often. I never saw him lose his state of equipoise. There was no business or other selfish tie that bound him to me, and yet I enjoyed the closest association with him. I was but a briefless barrister then, and yet whenever I saw him, he would engage me in a conversation of seriously religious nature. Though I was then groping and could not be said to have any serious interest in religious discussion, still I found his talk of absorbing interest. I have since met many a religious leader or teacher. I have tried to meet the heads of various faiths, and I must say that no one else has made on me the impression that Raichand Bhai did. His words went straight home to me. His intellect compelled as great a regard from me as his moral earnestness, and deep down in me was a conviction that he would never unwillingly lead me astray, and he would always confide to me his innermost thoughts. In my moments of spiritual crisis, therefore, he was my refuge. And yet, in spite of my regard for him, I could not enthrone him in my heart as my guru. That throne has remained vacant, and my search still continues. I believe in the Hindu theory of guru and his importance in spiritual realization. I think there is a great deal of truth in the doctrine, and true knowledge is impossible without a guru. An imperfect teacher may be tolerable in mundane matters, but not in spiritual matters. Only a perfect jnani deserves to be enthroned as a guru. There must therefore be ceaseless striving after perfection, for one gets the guru that one deserves. Infinite striving after perfection is one's right. It is its own reward. The rest is in the hands of God. Thus, though I could not place Raichand Bhai on my throne of my heart as a guru, we shall see that he was on many occasions my helper and guide. Three moderns have left a deep impress on my life and captivated me. Raichand Bhai by his living contact, Tolstoy by his book The Kingdom of God is within you, and Ruskin by his Unto this last. The Kingdom of God is within you, and Ruskin by his Unto this last. Okay. Tolstoy by his book The Kingdom is within you, and Ruskin by his Unto this last. But these more in proper place. Number 2. How I began life. My elder brother had built high hopes on me. The desire for wealth and name and fame was great in him. He had a big heart, generous to a fault. This, combined with his simple nature, had attracted him many friends, and though through them he expected to get me briefs. He also assumed that I should have a swinging practice, and had in that expectation allowed the household expenses to become top heavy. He had left no stone unturned in preparing the field for my practice. The storm in my castle over my foreign voyage was still brewing. It had divided the caste into two camps, one which immediately readmitted me, and the other which was bent on keeping me out. To please the former, my brother took me to Nasik. Before going to Rajkot, gave me a bath in the sacred river, and on reaching Rajkot, gave a caste dinner. I did not like this at all, but my brother's love for me was boundless, and my devotion to him was in proportion to it. And so I mechanically acted as he wished, taking his will to be the law. The trouble about readmission to the caste was thus practically over. I never tried to seek admission into the section that had refused it, nor did I feel even mental resentment against any of the headmen of that section. Some of these regarded me with dislike, but I scrupulously avoided hurting their feelings. I fully respected the caste regulations about excommunication. According to these, none of my relations, including my father-in-law and mother-in-law, or and even my sister and brother-in-law could entertain me, and I could not as much drink water at their houses. They were prepared secretly to evade the prohibition, but it went against the grain with me to do a thing in secret that I would not do in public. The result of my scrupulous conduct was that I never had the occasion to be troubled by caste. Nay, I have experienced nothing but affection and generosity from the general body of the section that still regards me as excommunicated. They have even helped me in my work without ever expecting me to do anything for the caste. It is my conviction that these good things are due to my non-resistance. Had I agitated for being admitted to the caste, like had I admitted to divide it into more camps, had I provoked the castemen, they would have surely retaliated, and instead of steering clear of the storm, I would, on arrival from England, have found myself in the whirlpool of agitation and perhaps a party to dissimulation. My relations with my wife were still not as I desired. Even my stay in England had not cured me of my jealousy. I continued my squeamishness and suspiciousness in spite of every little thing, and hence all my cherished desires remained unfulfilled. I had decided that my wife should learn reading and writing and I should help her in her studies, but my lust came in the way and she had to suffer for my own shortcoming. Once I went the length of sending her away to her father's house and consented to receive her back only after I had made her thoroughly miserable. I saw later that all this was pure folly on my part. I had planned reform in the education of children. My brother had children, and my own child, which I had left at home when I went to England, was now a boy of nearly 4. It was my desire to teach these little ones physical exercise and make them hardy, and also to give them the benefit of my personal guidance. In this, I had my brother's support, and I succeeded in my efforts more or less. I very much liked the company of children, and the habit of playing and joking with them has stayed with me till today. I have never since thought that I should make a good teacher of children. The necessity of food reform was obvious. Tea and coffee had already found their place in the house. My brother had thought it fit to keep some sort of English atmosphere ready for me on my return, and to that end, crockery and such things that used to be kept in the house only for special occasions were now in general use. My reform put the finishing touch. I introduced oatmeal porridge and cocoa to replace the tea and coffee. But in truth, it became an addiction to tea and coffee. Boots and shoes were already there. I completed the Europeanization by adding the European dress. Expenses thus went up. New things were added every day. We had succeeded in tying a white elephant to our door, but how the wherewithal was to be found. To start a practice in Rajkot would have meant sure ridicule. I had hardly the knowledge of a qualified vakil, and yet I expected to be paid 10 times his fees. No client would be fool enough to engage me, and even if such a one was to be found, should I add arrogance and fraud to my ignorance and increase the burden of debt I owed to the world. My friends advised me to go to Bombay and for some time in order to gain experience of the High Court, to study Indian law and to try and get what briefs I could. I took up the suggestion and I went. In Bombay, I started a household with a cook and as incompetent as myself. He was a Brahmin. I did not treat him as a servant but as a member of the household. He would pour water over himself but never wash. His dhoti was dirty as also his sacred thread, and he was completely innocent of the scriptures. But how was I to get a better cook? Well, Ravi Shankar, for that was his name, I would ask him, you may not know cooking, but surely you must know your Sandhya, daily, which is daily worship, etc. Sandhya, sir, the plough is our Sandhya and the spade our daily ritual. That is the type of Brahman I am. I must live on your mercy, otherwise agriculture is of course there for me. So I had to be Ravi Shankar's teacher. Time I had enough. I began to do half the cooking myself and introduce the English experiments in vegetarian cookery. I invested in a stove and with Ravi Shankar began to run the kitchen. I had no scruples about inter-dining. Ravi Shankar too came to have none, and so we went on merrily together. There was only one obstacle. Ravi Shankar had sworn to remain dirty and keep the food unclean. But it was impossible for me to get along in Mumbai for more than 4 or 5 months, there being no income to square with the ever-increasing expenditure. This was how I began life. I found the barrister's profession a bad job. Much show and little knowledge, I felt a crushing sense of my responsibility. The first case. While in Bombay, I began on the one hand my study of the Indian law, on the other my experiments with dietetics, in which Gandhi, a friend, joined me. My brother, for his part, was trying his best to get me briefs. The study of Indian law was a tedious business. The civil procedure code I could in no way get on with. Not so, however, with the Evidence Act which Gandhi was reading for the solicitor's exam and would tell me all sorts of stories about barristers and vakil. Sir Firoz Shah's ability, he would say, lies in his profound knowledge of law. He has the Evidence Act by heart and knows all the cases on the 32nd section. But Badruddin Tyabji's wonderful power of argument inspires the judges with awe. The stories of stalwarts such as these would unnerve me. It is not unusual, he would add, for a barrister to vegetate for 5 or 7 years. That's why I have signed the articles of solicitorship. You should count yourself lucky if you can paddle your own canoe in 3 years' time. The expenses were mounting up every month. To have the barristers' board outside the house while still preparing for the barrister's profession inside was a thing to which I could not reconcile myself. Hence, I could not give undivided attention to my studies. I developed some liking for the Evidence Act and read Maine's Hindu law with deep interest. I had not the courage to conduct a case. I was helpless beyond words, and as the brides come home fresh to their father-in-law's house, even as brides come fresh to a father-in-law's house. About this time, I took up the case of one Mami Bhai. It was a small cause. You will have to pay some commission on the tout, I was told. I emphatically declined. But even the great criminal lawyer, Mr. So and so, makes 3 or 4 thousand a month pays commission. Who makes 3 or 4 thousand a month pays commission. Do not need to emulate him, I rejoined. I should be content with rupees 300 a month. My father did not get more. But those days are gone. Expenses in Bombay have grown up frightfully. You must be businesslike. I was adamant. I gave no commission but got Mami Bai's case all the same. It was an easy case. I charged rupees 30 for my fees. The case was not likely to last longer than a day. It was my debut in the small causes court. I appeared for the defendant and thus had to cross-examine the plaintiff's witness. I stood up, but my heart sank in my boots. My head was reeling and I felt as though the whole court was doing likewise. I could not think of any question to ask. The judge must have laughed and the vakils no doubt enjoyed the spectacle. I was past seeing anything. I sat down and told the agent that I could not conduct the case, that he better engage Patel and have the fee back from me. Mr. Patel was duly engaged for rupees 51. To him, of course, the case was child's play. I hastened from court not knowing whether my client had won or lost her case, but I was ashamed of myself and decided not to take up any more cases until I had the courage enough to conduct them. Indeed, I did not go to court again until I went to South Africa. There was no virtue in my decision. I simply made a virtue of necessity. There would be no one as foolish as to entrust his case to me, only to lose it. There was one more case in store for me in Mumbai. It was a memorial to be drafted. A poor Mussulman's land was confiscated in Porbandar. He approached me as a worthy son of a worthy father. His case appeared to be weak, but I consented to draft a memorial for him, the cost of printing to be borne by him. I drafted and read it out to friends. They approved it, and that to some extent made me feel confident that I was qualified enough to draft a memorial, as indeed I really was. My business could flourish if I drafted memorials without any fees, but that would be no grist to the mill. So I thought I would take up a teacher's job. My knowledge of English was good enough, and I should have loved to teach English to matriculation boys in some school. This, in a way, I could have met part at least of the fees. I came across an advertisement in the papers, wanted an English teacher to teach 1 hour daily. Salary to be 75. The advertisement was from a famous high school. I applied for the post and was called for an interview. I went there in high spirits, but when the principal found that I was not a graduate, he regretfully refused me. But I passed the London matriculation with Latin as my second language. True, but we want a graduate. There was no help for it. I wrung my hands in despair. My brother also felt much worried. We came to the conclusion that it was no use spending more time in Bombay. I should settle in Rajkot, where my brother himself, a petty pleader, could give me some work in shape of drafting applications and memorials. Then there was already a household at Rajkot. The breaking up of one at Mumbai meant a considerable saving. I liked the suggestion. My little establishment was thus closed after a stay of 6 months in Bombay. I used to attend the High Court daily whilst in Bombay, but I cannot say that I learned anything there. I had not the sufficient knowledge to learn much. Often I could not follow the cases and dozed off. There were others also who kept me company in this and thus lightened my load of shame. After a time, I even lost the sense of shame as I learned to think that it was fashionable to doze off in the High Court. If the present generation has also its briefless barristers like me in Bombay, I would commend them a little practical percept about living. Though I had lived in Girgaon, I hardly ever took a carriage or a tram car. I made it a rule to walk to the High Court. It took me quite 45 minutes, and of course, I invariably return home by foot. I have inured myself to the heat of the sun, and this walk to and from court saved a fair amount of money. And when many of my friends in Bombay used to fall ill, I do not remember ever once had I don't remember having once had an illness. Even when I began to earn money, I kept up the practice of walking to and from the office, and I'm still reaping the benefits of that practice. The first shock. Disappointed, I left Bombay and went to Rajkot, where I set up my own office. Here I got along moderately well. Drafting applications and memorials brought me an average of 300 a month. For this work, I had to thank influence rather than my own ability of my brother's partner having a settled practice. All applications which were really or to his mind of an important character he sent to barristers. To my lot fell the applications to be drafted on behalf of his poor clients. I must confess that I had to compromise the principle of giving no commission, which in Bombay I had so scrupulously observed. I was told that the conditions in the two cases were different, whilst in Bombay commissions had to be paid to touts, here they had to be paid to vakils who briefed you, and that here as in Bombay all barristers without exception paid a percentage of their fees as commission. The argument of my brother was for me unanswerable. You see, he said, that I am in partnership with another vakil. I can always be inclined to make over to you all the cases with which you can possibly deal, and if you refuse to pay a commission to my partner, you are sure to embarrass me. As you and I have a joint establishment, your fee comes to our common purse and I automatically get a share. But what about my partner? Suppose he gave the same case to some other barrister, he would get his commission from him. I was taken in by this plea and felt that if I were to practice as a barrister, I could not press my principle regarding commission in such cases. That is how I argued with myself, or to put it bluntly, how I deceived myself. Let me add, however, that I do not remember ever to have given commission in respect of any other case. Though I thus began to make both ends meet, I got the first shock of my life about this time. I had heard of what a British officer was like, but up to now had never been face to face with one. My brother had been a secretary and advisor to the late Rana Sahib of Porbandar before he was installed on his Gandhi, and hanging over his head at this time was a charge of having given wrong notice when at office. The matter had gone to the political agent who was prejudiced against my brother. Now I had known this officer when in England, and he may have been fairly friendly to me. My brother thought that I should avail myself of the friendship, and putting in good word on his behalf, try to abuse the political agent of his prejudice. I did not like this idea. I should not, I thought, try to take advantage of a trifling acquaintance in England. If my brother was really at fault, then what use was my recommendation? If he was innocent, then he should submit a petition in the proper course, and confident of his innocence face the result. My brother did not relish this idea. You do not know Kathiawad, he said, and you have not yet to know the world. Only influence counts here. It is not proper for you, a brother, to shirk your duty when you can clearly put in a good word about me to an officer you know. I could not refuse him, and so I went to the officer against my will. I knew I had no right to approach him and was fully convinced that I was compromising my self-respect. But I sought an appointment and I got it. I reminded him of my old acquaintance, but I immediately saw that Kathiawad was different from England, that an officer on leave was not the same as an officer on duty. The political agent owned the acquaintance, but the reminder seemed to stifle him. Surely you have not come here to abuse that acquaintance, have you? Seemed to be the meaning of that stiffness, and seemed to be written on his brow. Nevertheless, I opened my case. The Sahib was impatient. Your brother is an intriguer. I want to hear nothing from you. I have no time. If your brother has anything to say, let him apply through the proper channel. This answer was enough and perhaps deserved. But selfishness is blind. I went on with my story. The Sahib got up and said, you must go now. But please hear me out, said I. That made him more angry. He called out his peon and ordered him to show me the road. I was still hesitating when the peon came in, placed his hands on my shoulder and put me out of the room. The Sahib went away and also the peon, and I departed, fretting and fuming. I once wrote out and sent a note to this effect: "You have insulted me. You have assaulted me through your peon. If you make no amends, I will have to proceed against you." Quick came the answer through his savar: "You were rude to me. I asked you to go out and you would not. I had no option but to order my peon to show you the door. Even after he asked you to leave the office, you did not do so. He therefore had to use just enough force to send you out. You are at liberty to proceed as you wish." With this answer in my pocket, I came home crestfallen and told my brother all that had happened. He was grieved, but was at loss as to how to console me. He spoke to his vakil friends, for I did not know how to proceed against the Sahib. Sir Firoz Shah Mehta happened to be in Rajkot at that time, and having come from Bombay for some case. But how could a junior barrister like me dare to see him? So I sent him the papers of my case, and through the vakil had engaged him, begged for his advice. "Tell Gandhi," he said, "that such things are common experience of many vakils and barristers. He is still fresh from England and hot-blooded. He does not know the English officer. If he would earn something and have an easy time here, let him tear up the note and pocket the insult. He will gain nothing by proceeding against the Sahib, and on the contrary will very likely ruin him. Tell him that he has yet to know life." This advice was as bitter as poison to me, but I had to swallow it. I pocketed the insult but also profited from it. "Never again shall I place myself in such a false position. Never again shall I try to exploit friendship in such a way," said I to myself, and since then I have never been guilty of a breach of that determination. This shock changed the course of my life. With this, we will take a break at this stage and let's recap whatever we've read till now. So basically, the reading began with Gandhi passing the bar examination, but realizing that he had uh, uh, just a piece of paper but no experience, and that passing the bar and practicing the law were two different things. He had those doubts whilst in England itself, and therefore kept taking the advice of people. People said that there's no way for you to go except to plunge yourself in work, learn while you're there, get a good understanding of Indian law, get a good understanding of Hindu and Mohammedan law, which you will get in India, and keep practicing till as you keep studying. So Gandhi lands in Bombay, and his brother's there to receive him, where his brother uh, gives him the shock news that his mother has passed away. This is a devastating news for Gandhi, who was hoping to see his mother and hug her, and and he was longing and pining for her. The news that she's no longer there kind of gave him a very rude shock. But then he realized that it is wise to be practical in that situation, and so maybe he never had tears, and he continued. He plowed his way through what life had to offer to him. What life had to offer to him was a realization that he was a well qualified barrister from England who was of no use in India because he did not know the Indian laws. He could possibly recite Roman law, but that was uh, completely useless for any client of his, and therefore when he came down, he and his brother started to make a plan. There was also the issue of him breaking over caste lines, so his brother first brought him to Nasik, gave him a dip in the holy Ganges, brought him back to Rajkot, gave him a caste dinner. Gandhi was not very happy about all these things, but his respect and love for his brother uh, made him quiet, and he kind of played along with it so that they can move on. Now, after that, they decided that they would go to Bombay because there was not much work in Rajkot. Gandhi went, so there was a lot of expenses that had occurred meanwhile. In that time, Gandhi realized that he should reform his family. He started with reforming education, food, which was they used to have a lot of tea and coffee. So Gandhi's made a practice of oatmeal porridge and cocoa. They were already had started to wear shoes. The next reform was in clothes. They had already started to wear shoes, but he felt that they should have the European dress. So this meant a considerable amount of expenses because it meant this for his brother, his brother's children, and his own boy who was 4 years now. So they were just adding on expenses without getting any source of income. Now they realized that there was not much for Gandhi to do in Rajkot. Obviously, he had no experience of the local law, so they decided to go to Bombay, which had the High Court. Gandhi could go and learn there and practice there too. Gandhi went there. He got a cook. The cook now was very incompetent, but he was a Brahmin, supposedly high caste, and that was his only qualification. So Gandhi kind of started partly cooking, and he felt that he should educate and reform the poor Brahmin, his cook. Now, in Bombay, he started attending the cases in the High Court, which is basically sitting and watching them. After a period of time, he started getting bored, and he would kind of go off to sleep. And he had company of other people doing so, so it kind of became a practice. Um, so obviously, he spent about 5 to 6 months like this. His brother tried his best to get him a lot of cases. But eventually, when he got one case, he kind of squandered it away, because when he realized, he went to the court, he stood in front of the lawyers, and he was completely tongue tied. He could not address the judge. He could not begin to talk. So he immediately went to the client and said that, please give the case to someone else. You can take the fee back. And he recommended another lawyer who easily aced the case. After this, Gandhi realized that he would not practice law, but not practicing and only studying law was obviously adding to the expense without any income. So he and his brother, after the period of 6 months in Bombay, decided to go back to Rajkot. In Rajkot, his brother was somebody who used to deal in pleas. Gandhi also had an issue in Bombay where he would not give commissions, which meant that he was not getting any regular set of work. So in Rajkot, his brother convinced him that this was not possible. You had to work on commissions, because he and his brothers were partners there, and his brother had another vakil, or rather lawyer, who used to give him the cases, who would give him the uh, jobs to draft. Gandhi used to draft memorials and proposals, and if uh, Gandhi's brother's lawyer friend was giving him the work, he obviously needed commissions. Otherwise, he could rather give it to anybody else, because whatever Gandhi was earning, his brother also was getting a share of it. But his lawyer friend could obviously give it to anyone else. So Gandhi's brother kind of explained this to Gandhi in detail, and on why he should give commission. Gandhi unwillingly accepted it, but later in his life made sure that he would not give any commissions. The other difference was, in Bombay, the commissions were being given to touts, so it seemed to Gandhi as though it was not legal, but here it was to a partner lawyer, and Gandhiji therefore reconciled to the idea in that manner. Uh, while in Rajkot, uh, there was an issue where his brother had got caught, and the issue needed to be settled with an English officer. Now Gandhi knew the English officer from his time in England, and he felt that as though he could go and talk to the English officer. Now the English officer that he knew in England was an officer on leave, but here the officer was on duty, and therefore Gandhi, assuming that he could get his way with the officer, was therefore not valid. When he went to the officer kind of immediately put him off, saying that your brother should know the law and know that he should handle it in the official channels. So please leave and do it in the official channels. Gandhi did not get up and go. Uh, the officer then called his peon, and the peon came and tapped Gandhi's shoulder. Gandhi eventually realized that he had no other option, but he felt insulted by the whole act of being asked to leave, and he wrote a strong letter saying that, uh, putting words like "you forced me out" and "assault," to which he got a immediate reply from the officer saying that, you were rude to me, I had asked you to leave, you did not do so, and therefore I called my peon, and the peon was also requested you before forcing you out. Now Gandhi somehow could not pocket the insult. He felt that he should file a case against the officer. He took the advice of a lot of people. They said that it might not be correct, and he was wasting time in other things. He took the advice of Firoz Shah Mehta. Firoz Shah Mehta is a huge lawyer, very famous in England. Gandhi took his support while in England. Gandhi landed at his house while in Bombay. Gandhi uh, lied to him. Gandhiji was given letters of introduction to many people, which included Firoz Shah Mehta and Dadabhai Nauroji. He always felt a little guilty of disturbing such great lawyers uh, for petty things, considering that he himself had not achieved anything and he had no right to impose all his problems on them. But Mr. Mehta was kind, and gave him the right advice, which was that you're at the beginning of the career. What you've gone through is very common in the practice of law, and most lawyers and barristers go through it. Just pocket this insult, learn from him, and move on. So that's the advice which Gandhiji felt that helped him in his law profession and in his life. There's one aspect that I guess I have missed out in my summarization, which is his returning back to his wife. Gandhi realized when he came back to his wife that he had not changed really as a husband. He continued to be very jealous and petty around her, to the extent that he would even fight with her, and he had once sent her home to her father's house till she agreed to whatever condition he had. Uh, at the back of his heart, he was loving and he wanted to reform her, but the nature of jealousness and pettiness kind of had not left him. So with this, we've kind of summarized the entire chapter. It's been a lovely experience, and I hope that you are enjoying the book. Do share your inputs and comments. I can see that the light behind me is not making the visual clear, but like I said earlier, you are coming here to listen to the book and not look at me. So, but if you still feel that you need a different background, you have any other comments or suggestions, please write in the comment section. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.